Hello, and welcome to the Some Kind of Mystic podcast, the show that bridges all things mystical with the chaotic and unpredictable experience of being authentically human. I'm your host, Jessie Herman, life coach, energy healer, artist, mother, and channel for the non-physical entity group Vagrein. In other words, I'm some kind of mystic, and so are you. Today, I'm very excited to welcome onto the show Barbara With. Barbara is an international peace activist, award-winning author, publisher, psychic channel, composer, and performer, workshop facilitator, and inspirational speaker. Barbara has been channeling for a long time now. In fact, she started when she was a child as a piano prodigy, then becoming a singer-songwriter and a musician that was consistently on tour. Later on, the angels came in and began to speak to her, who eventually revealed themselves to actually be the consciousness of 12 famous dead people who, from the afterlife, are working with humanity for world peace. In this amazing conversation, we talk about metaphysics, conflict resolution, peace, and the issues that are currently occurring in the world, Einstein's unified field theory, consciousness, and the science of compassion. This was an amazing interview, and I especially liked how Barbara's mission at this point in time is to find people who are willing. In fact, her World Peace Tour is called Participation of the Willing, and she is currently going all around the world to teach nonviolent action and end the age of war. Don't forget to stay tuned through the end of the episode because Barbara is offering us a special discount coupon for her services, and we all want to know what her fun fact is. Please welcome to Some Kind of Mystic, Barbara With. So welcome, Barbara With, to the show. Welcome to Some Kind of Mystic. Thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thanks, Jessie, so much for having me. I'm so looking forward to this conversation.
Me too. I had to look at some of your work. You're also a channeler, but you have so much more depth beyond just that term. And you've actually experienced that term in so many different ways from such a young age. I understand you were a musical child prodigy, so to speak. And even at that young age, you understood that that was something that was coming externally to you. Can you talk a little bit about your background?
Yes, when I was 5, I climbed up on the piano and started to figure out how it worked. By 12, I was writing songs. And at 17, I got out of high school and I went right on the road. In 1972, I had 2 sets of original music.
Wow.
And that was the Joni Mitchell era. So it was a very good time for me. But as I described how I wrote music when I was 12, I said I went out into outer space and I listened for the song. And I just realized this morning that I was listening for the song because I grew up in such a war zone. I shouldn't use that term in that way. I should not, but it was there was sexual abuse, there was dissociation and such. So going out into outer space was part of that. But I was listening for a song that would correlate with this massive amount of emotion that I held here because of all of the trauma and the PTSD.
Right.
And I'd say the only way I can live is if I get this stuff out of me. And so I'd listen for the song and then it was already written.
Okay.
So that was my introduction to what I think the process of channeling is, which I think we all do it. I think
I believe that as well.
mathematicians do it and musicians do it. But what was for me was that when I was in high school, one of my theater friends said, "Hey, you got to come and see what my mom does." And he didn't explain, but his mom was a channel. We didn't call her that, but she was just this little Buddha-like woman who sat in front of this picture of Jesus and lit a candle. And she said, "I go out into outer space and I listen for messages. I'm just a big antenna." And she talked to me about my music and that it was going to become this amazing thing. And it was this healing journey. And I was on this mission and everything began to come true as I was learning what it meant to have a psychic reading from a channel. And I would study what she told me, and then I would write down what I thought it meant. And then I would go through life and see what it actually meant.
Yeah, for sure.
So it was just a really interesting self-learning thing that came out of me.
Yeah.
But as music went on, I became more addicted and not really healing anything inside, and
Hmm.
sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And I had to come in off the road and give up this beautiful life that I had dreamed of since I was 5. I
Right.
was going to be a
Yeah.
rock star. That was it. And I had the music to prove it and was winning awards, but I didn't have the self-love.
Okay. So fundamental.
And so many, how so many people strive for fame because they need to be
Validated. Yeah,
acknowledged.
sure.
Yeah. So anyway, that was the point where I started to spontaneously automatic write
Okay.
during a letter I was writing to my friend. And it was a much different voice. And because I was mad at her. So I was like, and it came in this beautiful idea of, yes, when you make judgments about people, the lens closes down and you
Mm.
only see a little tiny bit of what's really going on. And so when I asked, well, who are you? I knew what it was. I mean, I'd been going to see Eunice for years, but it said sound. They said, we're sound. And, at that point, after my musical career and such, it wasn't a stretch to think there was something in the sound. I'm fine with
Right.
that.
Well, also sound is the form of vibration that you were most familiar with. Right now, maybe I don't know what year that was, but now there's more of an opening towards metaphysical spiritual concepts, and people understand like vibration or frequency on that sort of, esoteric level. Whereas back then, maybe sound was the vibration that like your brain could process as, oh, this is something I can hear almost. I know it's not hearing exactly.
No, that my mind can accept without
Yes,
going crazy.
exactly. Yeah.
Because if Albert Einstein, when I said, "Who are you?" and he said Albert Einstein, the whole show would have been over
Right,
at that
right.
moment when I
Okay,
first
so
started.
speaking of Albert Einstein, I understand that that is one of your main friends that comes through, that one of your main sources of channeled knowledge, and that you've been working with his energy for how long now?
Well, ultimately, my whole life. He was
Okay.
back then with the music too,
Yeah, for sure.
right? Because he was a musician.
Right. I know the
And
feeling.
as I look back and see how my life that this has been a gentle unfolding of, going from an antenna, right? I was an antenna.
Hmm.
Okay, I did that for a while. And then I wanted to do groups.
Right.
And so I started doing groups, and the question was, who are you? And the answer, well, we're angels. You can call us angels.
Okay.
And I was very skeptical. I have been an antenna my whole life. That's how I knew it. There were no Pleiadians but the divine information that was coming out, it was so high level. And now I had these two women, Kim and Teresa, the psychic sorority, we called ourselves,
Hmm.
who were going to be a witnesses and a part of the documentation of whatever this thing was that we were doing when I was doing a group. So angels were okay.
Okay.
But I truly think in retrospect, it was just a part of the gradual unfolding. And then how it unfolded that I could speak to people who had passed on
Right. Okay.
was a very personal journey too, with these things that happened with friends and their mothers and other things. And
Yeah.
but how I got to then talk to famous dead people, that was a whole long transition. And that got me to Einstein. And then by the time I got to him and I decided I was going to do a book just for him, everything shifted into this, like, we're going to reveal to you now who we all are and what we've been
Right.
doing all
So
of your life.
this brings you to the main topic that I definitely want to get onto in this conversation, and that is your what I guess I'm projecting onto you, but maybe it's also correct. Your mission, your collaboration with the energies that come through are an endeavor towards what we would recognize as world peace, or the end of human inter interaction in the form of conflict. And that is what you're mostly channeling now, from what I understand. And that's also the teaching that you're bringing through with your conflict resolution system. Is that correct?
Revolution. Yeah,
Revolution. Okay.
revolution. Yes. Yes. Yes,
Wonderful.
that is all very correct.
Right. And is that also related to Albert Einstein and this group? Is that how that came about? Can you talk about how that came about, and did that surprise you at all?
Well, it came about because when they were angels, and Kim and Teresa and I were doing all of these channeling, and they wanted to know what was going on, and they were hungry for information, and everything they were telling us were like, wow, opening our eyes and shifting our perception. And they said, we're here, we have a process that need humans to test on conflict, because we think it's a revolutionary way to handle conflict that will also be a pathway to world peace. But we need lab rats, with the air quotes for those at home, anyway. And so the three of us, I'm here at Kim's house right now,
Oh,
staying down
brilliant.
in Minneapolis, and we were just talking about that. We were just sucked in because what they were telling us to do was changing our lives. It was teaching us how to, for the first time in our life, not only self-love, but take responsibility for ourselves.
Mm,
And so we were like, yeah. And then so we kept doing groups and transcribing, and pretty soon we started to fight. And
right.
we went and got the transcripts and used them on that first fight. And it had a revolutionary way it turned out than how I had ever experienced conflict before.
Right.
And so that's where it originated. But I think in the bigger picture, because you're looking at now what I know now, I didn't know then that it was Einstein was in on all this with
Okay.
those angels
Yeah.
too, was that Einstein in real life was one of the biggest peace activists. He wrote the Einstein Manifesto, which was his last words to the world, that
Hmm.
was read on July 9th, 1955, after he had died. And it was based on these conversations he'd had with Freud back in the 30s about how to end war. He did a series of letters, and they thought, well, maybe we should have one world government. And that quickly became apparent that
Hmm.
it's easier to denature plutonium than it is to get evil out of people. So that wouldn't work.
Hmm.
So Freud suggested three things: cultivate open minds that are hungry for the truth, cultivate community of the heart, and then tell people exactly what's going to happen if the war that we think is going to happen breaks out. Don't sugarcoat it.
Right.
Let them feel it so they'll take action on it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So his last words that were read after he was dead was his plea to the governments to resolve your conflicts. And it says it in there, those three things: we need to nurture the minds, we need to create community, and here's what's going to happen if we have a war with nuclear weapons.
Sure. Yeah.
You think, oh, you drop something on Moscow and they're gone, but we're all okay. No,
No.
everybody, you get to watch your grandchildren die a slow, tragic death.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those were his last words. And I don't know how you feel about what you think happens when we lose our bodies and we go back into energy, but I believe what we're attached to, we just imprint right on in that energy, that even though our bodies are going, we've got that focus, we got that attachment. It's why the Buddhists strive for detachment, so that when they get to the end of life, they don't have to
Right.
attach to
Right.
anything.
Yeah. So what you're saying in terms of like the energetic nature of us perhaps carrying that baggage around, the baggage of however the end of the experience was, is what you're saying?
And baggage or not, I mean,
Right.
even if maybe you just don't want to leave that person that you love so dearly, and you just
Hmm.
don't want to let go. And so when you finally do let go, now you've got that karmic thing, right? Okay,
Okay.
now it's in the energy again, we might have to come back. But I'm saying that if you understand how Einstein died, what was on his energy,
Right.
and then think about the possibility is that coming into afterlife, just being obsessed with
Sure.
how
With
can I get
resolving
this
that.
message
Yeah.
back? And
Mm.
how can I finally articulate my unified field theory? Because
Right.
that's the other thing that he didn't do while he was living. And so it would make sense to me that if there was somebody who would die, go to afterlife, figure out how it works, find a way to get it back, that
Yeah.
it would be
Exactly.
Einstein,
Yeah. For sure.
but
Yeah.
so yeah,
Yeah. And so you also do work. Well, first of all, I want to get into revolution. Is it revolution? Right. Revolution.
conflict revolution. Yes,
Okay.
yes, it's a revolution.
So is there like a Cliff Notes version of this that my listeners can just have a taste, a little taste of what this system is, how perhaps they could start experimenting with it in their, direct lives in their direct community, and I'm imagining, because I know that this is the case, that when we do start experimenting with making things better in the immediate vicinity of our frequency, that has a ripple on effect to the world, at large. So it really is a one person at a time type of thing. So if any listener here now is listening and wants to have an experiment, what would you tell them to do, or what would be the way you could outline this for them?
Yeah, here's the Cliff Notes version, is that we work with what we call three human dimensions. And what intellect, which we associate in the head, intuition that we associate in the heart, and emotion, which we associate in the solar plexus. And then we also cultivate what we call a witness, a part of us that can step out of ourselves and observe exactly what's going on in these three human dimensions at any time.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is that in a much longer version of the scientific unified field and maps of human consciousness, compassion is the fifth fundamental force of the universe. So we are all made up of compassion with its compass as its root. It does various things. We won't get into it this moment. But so when we're breathing and we're feeling the source, which is in the center of the earth, picture it there, and you're breathing, whatever you're doing, if you're meditating and breathing, or you're trying to breathe through some whatever, picture yourself breathing up from the center of the earth, because we are a part of the earth. And this is why one person at a time it can be really huge if you go down into the roots. So what we want to do is what we call align to compassion. And part of compassion is the fifth fundamental force is influence, is that it makes us realize we're all one, that we're all community, and it impels this system to work for the good of the whole community. That's what compassion does as our root. It comes up in the form of this deep emotion, this whole spectrum of emotion, which really we approach a little bit differently than, well, a lot differently. That's what we call conflict resolution. And then it moves up into the heart and it becomes the voice of intuition. And this voice is it's the next, it's a small impelling to tell you to take the next most advantageous step for the good of the whole. Mm-hmm. In that moment. It's part of the moment. It's not about figuring out, should you go to college next year or whatever. It's about that functioning. And then that flows up into the intellect. And the intellect is the one that where free will is operated out of. You don't make decisions with your heart. If you're going to turn left, it's the intellect that sends the messages to the hand to go to the wheel to turn. So the intellect has been given the power to say no to God within you.
Yeah.
And this is where he claims, I'm a skeptic about anything, but at the root, this is where all conflict originates.
Right.
Because compassion will never impel us. Now, the thing we have to remember is that it's a perfect system. So what's coming up from the source and projecting and all that mathematics down there is perfectly going to manifest what's being programmed into that lens on the surface of the planet where our bodies are. So it's why we can be on the brink of World War III, and it's still a perfect system. Yeah. Because in this part of the wave, there's so much conflict. People don't even know they have this part of the wave. Right. Much less what to do with it. But in our simple version, when you're in a conflict, to step into that witness and you separate out these three parts. And this is what I loved about the system, because I'm a self-starter, right? I like to develop systems. And while they were teaching, the angels were teaching us this, it's like, think of emotion like electricity. Like, we want to process emotion, all of it. We don't want to not feel the anger or the depression. We want to process all of it and move it, but not let it attach to our thoughts, because our egos, like you said, you don't want to project, but projection at its root is a part of how we have reality, right? This powerful energy. But, so you got like going on a diet, you can't stop eating, you have to still project. But anyway, so our system is about developing this self-awareness of what we feel and how we process it. And I'll just say briefly, this is it. The more you can get it away from any thought process, it could be your past life, it could be your past
Mm-hmm.
childhood, it could be the whole earth, it could be your neighbor. It doesn't matter. You don't have to think about it. That's not feeling.
Right. Exactly. Yep. Agreed.
So using the breath to move emotion, feel it like an electricity, and then listening for what intuition is going to impel you to do. And to do that, then you have to go into the intellect and figure out what the heck is going on up there.
Sure. Yeah.
So these are like three different spiritual organs. You know, your heart, you fix it one way, you fix your stomach a different way. You handle your emotion with the breath and the movement,
Mm-hmm.
and then you handle your intellect with whatever you need to do reduce that fluctuation, to whether it's meditation, whether it's yoga, whether it's whatever you do to stop thinking so much
Mm-hmm.
and get that ego out of the way and start listening for what this natural intuition is going to impel you to do.
Right. Right.
So that's sort of the basic overview of how it works.
That's really a great description. It definitely aligns with the way Vagrein, the entity that I channel, talks about emotion, and emotion being a functionality of being human, not something to be afraid of, not something to run away from, something really that is there for your benefit, so that you then have access to that feeling state, right? Like that what you're calling intuition is the information that emotion is trying to transmit, and then it's really your mind that gets in the way. I mean, we're totally on board and agreed about that. And your mind is often very conditioned compared to, I mean, your heart is never conditioned. Your heart is pure. So, with that description, right, I'm thinking about people right now in the world who have the opportunity to listen to this podcast. We're talking about people who are in a position where probably they're in a space where there's currently security in their life, right? But there might be quite a bit of anxiety about global events that are occurring right now, a sense of helplessness, a sense of hopelessness, a sense of, I don't know what I can do to help, or I'm not even sure how to process the information of the things going on all around the world, the different conflicts that we're seeing erupting, the different injustices, or what can be perceived of as injustices, between the distribution of, even things such as like water or food, or the ability to go to schools, or whatever it is. There's a lot going on in the world right now that leads to very difficult emotions, I think, in a lot of the people that would be able to have time to listen to this. And I would like to sort of ask you how you would propose to someone to begin to apply um, this system to finding their balance, and maybe beginning to process also those types of thoughts. Like, I see something happening in the world, I don't agree with it, I feel like I'm taking a side, I feel like my mind is running away, and I'm not having access to compassion. What do I do?
Well, first of all, it's in the breath.
Okay.
A very rudimental place. All of us have to tap into our source and realize that the earth, we're all one here. And you and I, we're behind the lines. And I just want to share a brief story of after I launched this worldwide nonviolent action to end the age of war. That's what my world peace mission that I'm on right now is about. Shortly after I launched in July, I got a call from a woman in Israel
Mm-hmm.
in August and said, we're at our wits' end. We don't know what to do. And she was one of us. She was very spiritual. She believed in everything, and we all come here for a purpose. She had detached so much for it, but the us versus them that was going on in Israel was, and so she found me,
Mm-hmm.
coincidentally, and I ended up channeling for 25. She brought 25 Israelis, not channeling, but doing conflict revolution.
Okay.
And it was very difficult because I'd never thought of conflict revolution as a triage Zoom. I mean, a triage like battlefield technique. No,
Right.
when
Yeah.
you're in that place. No. Okay. So, but I would absolutely do anything for you.
Right.
So I taught it. And she's been one in our group, and she came on Saturday, and
Mm-hmm.
her daughter was at ground zero. Her daughter is in the military, and her daughter had to watch 10 of her friends get mowed down and
Mm-hmm.
apart.
Mm-hmm.
and had to deal with the babies.
Yeah.
And so my friend said and she was more than willing to share with us what she did in those moments of crying for 3 days,
Okay.
being under so much PTSD that she doesn't even, you can't wrap your mind around and the whole movement is it cannot go on.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just can't go on. And we asked her, how are you, we're going to step back because we are behind the lines.
Exactly. Yeah.
How are you dealing with this? Are you finding hate as you look at those poor children? What's going on in that level? And she said, hearts are so open here. There's 500 refugees down the street. There's 50 next door. They're coming in everywhere, all bloodied, and people are leaping up and finding those ways to help in that moment when it's impossible. It's an impossible thing. And we're all just on this level together. And she said, I couldn't go fully into forgiveness for those babies yet, but I can return to love. And while I still hear myself screaming, why, I can get back to love.
Yeah.
So I wanted to share that because I think it's important to give those of us who are behind the lines, some perspective. And like Freud said to Einstein in the 30s, if we don't look away, we don't want to add to what you're talking about is free floating anxiety.
Right. Yeah. No,
And,
absolutely. It's not
and,
necessary.
and that's where there's that true anxiety, the PTSD that we're in the emotional realm, and it's moving up, and chances are intuition is trying very insistently to get us to rest, to get
Yeah.
us to
Take
stay
time.
in love.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And when it gets up here, because we're looking for that outside thing
A solution.
that is causing that anxiety so
Yeah.
that we can somehow deal with it out there or in our heads. And that's never going to happen.
Right. Yeah.
So to be able to feel that anxiety, understand what it is, and this is part of what we all need to do right now.
Right.
If
Absolutely.
everybody says, I don't know what to do, I get that. I mean, I totally get that. But this is part of it. We're supposed to start feeling and breathing on a regular basis with the intention that we're going to push these hearts open. And however you pray, however you envision a peaceful world. But the second part of it is this thing that Einstein brings when he
Right.
brings us this unified field theory,
Mm-hmm.
where there's all of this conflict within us in ways that we have no idea. And that when we go in there with intention to say, okay, I'm diving in, I'm going to do my part to see,
Right.
then the simple step is, and this is not brain surgery, that how Einstein puts it all together is brilliant, but when you're obsessed about something, maybe it's safety,
Yep.
right? Oh my God, I'm not going to be safe. So listen to what you're thinking, listen to what you need. Okay, so maybe you perceive somebody outside you as a threat, but really you need safety. Then when you revolve your focus back to yourself and you cultivate that witness, you can go in and find out where you're not keeping yourself safe.
That's
That
right.
doesn't mean that the world is not a terrible place right now.
Agreed.
But if yours is the trigger of safety,
Yeah.
that's that creative, artistic, mysterious clue for you that speaks right to you. Somebody else's trigger is whatever, disrespect or
Right. Sure.
whatever they are, revolve them back and then have that humility, because this is one way we're going to address the ego. Because intellect's going to tell you, well, I don't do that. It's going to start jabbering away. This is who I am. I'm a wonderful person. And that will prevent you from seeing what is conflicted in this huge. And this is a lot of energy that we can free.
Right. Absolutely.
Very quickly. And when we do that, the idea is if the system is operating perfectly, what's going to manifest in the lens is going to be greater than any of us could go at, could protest, could write a letter. And I'm not saying don't do those things. Intuition will tell you
which
what
ones
to
are
do.
correct. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. It's
That's a
totally in
lot.
alignment, and I'm one to believe that like all channeled energy is collective consciousness. Like Einstein's part of an aspect of collective consciousness, Vagrein's an aspect of collective consciousness, which is why so many channeled messages are exactly the same. Like different flavor, different voice, different name to it, whatever, but it's all the same message. And in terms of Vagrein, which is what I channeled, they're very much like, listen, if you're seeing something out there in the world, it's not a coincidence. It's because that same energy, the same energy that creates the manifesting is in you, right? So as we each choose to look into ourselves and say, see, like I've seen atrocity and violence, you know, where are the areas within myself where I've had temptation towards that sort of thing, where I've closed my own eyes to the actions that I take, maybe on a passive level, that lead to the suffering of others, blah, 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 blah. And they're non-judgmental. I mean, I believe also, you know, Einstein, they're not actually judging anyone as they're transmitting this knowledge, but they are saying like, we are still continuing to choose separation even on an individual level, right? You know, like we're choosing that in our day-to-day lives. So to look out into the world and see the grand example of it, and then to condemn the grand example of like war or the taking advantage of other people, etc., um, is the that ego, that veil coming over your eyes, going like, it's not me, it's them, right? But it is, because they are you, and we are like, though there are things that are demonstrable that no, that's reality, that's not me, that's not this, that's not that. You know, even the simple fact that there is such an imbalance between the distribution of like who gets to have what, right, is also an example of like, we're all kind of participating in this. So as we slowly recognize that, then that intuition comes up and goes, maybe I could downsize. Maybe I could stop spending so much on whatever, you know, new fad thing it is. Maybe I could give more to the people around me in my direct neighborhood who don't have as much, or maybe I could be kinder to the checkout, you know, person at the cash. Maybe I could go visit, you know, the old people who are very lonely a little bit more often, or whatever it is. Maybe I could be nice to that cat that pisses in my garden, you know. And we're all,
Yes.
Vagrein would use the word guilty, but in the actual meaning of the word, we're not condemned, we're not judged, we're not, you know, going to be punished for this guilt, but we are responsible
No.
because the responses we've been choosing are based upon separation. So I feel like what you're sharing also is that ability and the mechanism of the auto reflection that allows you to see that the thing that's bothering you the most is that key towards where you have the next opportunity to up level yourself and discard of those energies within yourself. So I do know that there's the metaphysical aspect of Einstein's work. What does he say about manifesting reality?
Well, this whole explanation of the unified field and the maps of human consciousness are the illustration of how it happens and how we fit into it and where our power lies within it and
Mm,
how it operates. And it proves what you and I are saying. It's the proof
okay.
that if you the basic map is, you know, we have this the earth, right? Because it's a unified field.
Right.
It's both the cellular and the macrocosm. So the earth is the center of the creation. It's the source in the center of the earth. And as that wave comes out, and he calls it the compilation of consciousness. So at your root, you have your own, I have my own, and it surrounds all of the mathematics that are going to become what we're sitting in this room. And it's carried via a gravitational wave, and it begins with that emotional level, right? That primordial soup of the
Mm-hmm.
basis. It splits into two, where it goes into then the sound and the intuition, and then it gets to the intellect, and it manifests your body, which becomes the projector and the perceiver,
Mm-hmm.
and the wave continues on out into the heavens, and it hooks up with the earth again on the electromagnetic field, goes back down into the North Pole. And this is the spinning string that contains all of our life. So this is proof that when we resolve those conflicts on the inner level,
Mm-hmm.
things just manifest. Like, for example, I had a client in Norway, once. She came to a workshop and she had this conflict with her mother-in-law. My mother-in-law hates me. She wants to deport me. She was from Barbados, had married a Norwegian. And she's hated me for 25 years. So we get into the workshop, and about 3 hours in, she looks at me. She goes, "You know where this is going, don't you?" And I said, "Well, it's a formula. And I'm not like this amazing seer. It's a formula that you can see in anybody by what they're saying that's so disconcerting." And
Right.
she looked at me and she had these big eyes and she started to tear up and she said, "I'm so homesick,
Mm.
but I can't go home. I've got these kids and this husband." Well, excuse me, you've got a 14-year-old and a 17-year-old and a husband who is worth $500,000. Why can't you go home? What is it that's stopping you? Is it your mother-in-law you're manifesting to try to get an excuse to have to go home? I didn't say any of that, but this was
Sure.
what was going on in her
Yeah.
head. And she came back the next day, 25 years of conflict with her mother-in-law. I'm sure they still have conflict. There's always going to be conflict. But when you have that abscess of some big emotion that's
Sure. That you're
you're
not
not
wanting to
letting
look
your
at. It's going to
and then
manifest
your
in some other way.
and your intellect is telling you so strongly that it's your mother-in-law.
Right.
So
It's her
that's
fault.
why we have to start to break apart the emotion from the story,
Yeah.
get into our witness, and humble that wild horses of our intellect to
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
"No, I'm going to go in and I'm going to look. I'm going to be responsible. I'm going to be responsible." That's world peace in the day.
Right.
That I'm going to go in and be responsible for my own viewpoint, even though I don't think I even have conflict about it right now. I guarantee you the
Hmm.
amazing places that you'll be able to find and
Yeah.
heal and unify.
Absolutely. Yeah. And how close, I mean, do you know of the law of attraction? How close is what this is sharing? Like, because no, I know a lot of the listeners know about the law of attraction. So like your vibration manifests your reality. Now this is in line with that because it would mean that your emotion or the reluctancy to want to feel the emotions, which for some reason we've labeled as negative as opposed to just allowing them to be neutral, but um, our reluctance to feel those negative emotions keep them in our system. Therefore, they lower our actual vibration. And is there sort of like scientific type of information that's come through from your channeling with Einstein that has explained how that mechanism works? So when this consciousness comes up through the emotion and then it comes into the intuition, and then you with your mind, you're like, no, I'm going to decide, first of all, not to feel those emotions because they're uncomfortable. And second of all, assign some sort of coping mechanism to avoid them, and also perhaps even a story so that I can just ignore them all completely or like pass them off to someone else. It's someone else's fault that I feel bad, right? Like that's really
Exactly.
disempowering, by the way, because you're basically saying someone else has the magic to control how you feel, right? But in terms of the law of attraction, then the theory would be that, if I can just vibrate high enough, everything I want, even outside of conflict resolution, which is like a huge would be amazing. I'm not even sure most people want that, but that's another story. um, someone can manifest a car if they feel well enough about it, you know.
Well, and I think there's two different things here that we're talking about. So you're
Sure.
talking about the laws of attraction,
Yeah.
and certainly if I go into a room and I am pumped up with true joy, that I can attract to me people who are going to give me joy back.
Hmm.
That is certainly for sure. But there is this idea that we should be able to manifest anything that our minds can create.
Right. But then there's
And
the mind.
so here's an example is that since I was old enough to crawl, I wanted to be a rock star. I
Mhm.
devoted my whole life. I have music that should win Grammys, but there was a greater force at work in my life that I didn't know about at the time. I was trying to manifest something so hard and hold on to that. So there's an element in the laws of attraction that I disagree with,
Right.
in that there is a greater purpose that all of us come here for,
Hmm.
rather than just to manifest a car or this. I
Yeah.
totally, in fact, we have a whole thing about it's it's just as easy to manifest a green Ferrari as it is to manifest a red pencil.
Right.
It's just that our minds tell us, "Oh, I can't manifest a car. That won't work." Well,
For
okay,
sure.
then
For
you
sure.
won't.
Yeah, of
Right.
course. Yeah.
but I do think that our end goal is not to manifest everything we think we want, but to align ourselves to compassion and let go, to let what's that perfect manifestation in the lens, which is going to be so much bigger than you even know. Why would you want a supporting part on a
Yeah.
show when maybe you're destined to be a star? You
Yeah.
know, get out of the way and let go. And so I'm just of that mind
I totally agree with you. And I also feel that when you are like, if you manage to get to a place where your vibration is consistently high because you have let go of so much, right? Exactly what you said. What does arrive to you tends to be so much more exciting and delightful than your mind can come up with, because your mind is often coming up with things that are not what you actually want. It's coming up with solutions to problems that you think you have, right? So in the letting go of thinking you have problems, or in the letting go of, like, yes, the conflict, and the letting go and the finding compassion for those around you, you suddenly find out, you know what, I didn't want I don't know, a mansion in Beverly Hills with all this, all the bells and whistles, because that actually might be really boring, for this particular person, right? Instead, what I want is an adventurous life, or whatever, whatever. Or people do end up, and you do hear this kind of story too, people end up getting what they want and then they're miserable. They're absolutely miserable. They have a whole plan. I'm going to become the most whatever, whatever, whatever. And then they have, like, you, maybe even, your music was going well. You had the recognition, you had the fans, but it wasn't actually fulfilling you in the way that maybe you had hoped, because your soul was calling through and going, we're going to do something else completely different. And I love that kind of
and we're not
story.
going to tell you, and we're
We're
not
not going to
even
tell you.
going
Well,
to
that's
give
the
you
other
a
thing.
hint.
That's the
Yeah.
that's the other huge thing is, at some point you have to go, I release my need to control the existence that I've been given to be a witness to. And you just kind of go, okay, I guess this is who I am. I guess this is my life. And you float along with it. And that's I find that to
Well,
be really exciting.
and let me just add, this is a good place to add that when I came in off the road, and because couldn't go on anymore, I started to channel, and they started to teach me to listen to my intuition. That was a time where I ended up not only this mission coming in to be a writer. I have 6 books that you can find on synergyalliance.llc. I should remember to plug myself. Um, but then as I learned to follow my intuition, I have had a life that's unbelievable. In 2011, I founded a citizens media cooperative with a bunch of people in Wisconsin, and started reporting on the politics of what was going on in my state, and mostly because they were going to try to put in a 22-mile open pit iron ore mine on the shores of Lake Superior where I live. So
Mhm.
that whole life was also intuitively guided.
Right.
And I went through many other incarnations until just this summer, when it was time for me to put everything into this passion. And you know what? It's every step is synchronicity, it's miraculous, it's mysterious. Isn't that the kind of life people want to live? Don't they
Yeah.
want to live passionately and have a life be full of magic? Because mine is completely there after all this time. And it was a
Mhm.
long road for me, but this new generation of people being able to let go and look at it. So I would say, instead of trying to focus on what is it that I want and what am I supposed to be doing, focus on this process of aligning yourself to compassion, making sure you're feeling all your feelings, you're listening for this intuition, and then what's going to happen here up in your intellect, that's going to be the hardest part.
Yeah, that is actually the conflict, right? Like, I always talk to my coaching clients. I'm like, listen, we're gonna go into a process, right? And now your job is to go feel the feelings, and then I make them write it down often. I'm like, you have to write down everything that your brain, your thought process is telling you about why this thing isn't working, why it's not okay to feel your feelings, why, stepping into your power is not okay. So we do a lot of writing of, like, I want you to write it down just so it's on paper, and so that your brain feels validated that it's been seen, right? Then what we'll do is we'll thank the thoughts for their input, the same way you would thank, maybe an overbearing mother-in-law, right? we can always bear,
Exactly.
we can always blame the mother-in-law, the internal mother-in-law, right? Who really only means well, right? So our intellect also means well often, but it's a little bit misguided because of how much it absorbs when we're children, because of the way it stores trauma, because of the way it doesn't get all the information. So your brain doesn't ever have as much information as that intuition part of you does, right? Like it can't, it doesn't have
Exactly.
access to the universe. So it just makes much more sense to like go like, okay, brain, listen, you're great for figuring out how to help me build my dreams and create my projects and put together, record things so I can remember them later. But seeing your brain more of something like to observe, like your computer might sometimes have some, jittery bugs in it or something, and you might have to run an antivirus software on your computer. It's the same thing with your brain. It's not always working the way it should. Okay. And unfortunately, we do identify with our intellect much more than we do with our isness. What I would call isness might be what you call intuition or beingness. Um, so yeah, it's definitely worth letting go of all that. And then the same thing about the like manifesting, like, yeah, it's great to want your green Ferrari or whatever it is. But when you figure out that desire to feel good, right, is the ultimate like end game, right? If you feel good all the time, whether you have the car or not, it becomes very unattractive to have the things that you thought you wanted to have. So I'm totally in agreement with you with all of that. It's really wonderful. Do you
Yeah,
do
and
you feel like you'd want to do a little channeling for us today? Are you prepared to do that? Do you do spontaneous
oh,
channeling or
I can if you want to have a question of some sort or some
hmm.
direction to guide
Well,
us into something.
I would only want you to do that if there was some sort of message that you feel right now would want to be shared. We could talk about what's not specifically politically or anything like that, but what's happening in the world. But I do feel like something has changed very recently in terms of the up leveling of conflict, unfortunately, on the planet. And I'm one who believes that the catalyst that we experience, um, while there's a lot of suffering and negativity or perceived negativity associated with it, when there are periods of great catalyst, it's because we have periods of great invitation. And that invitation is really to reach into finding that compassion more deeply. So while feeling my feelings about things that are happening in the world right now, I'm also actually really enthusiastic on many ways that we're being invited and challenged to again declare over and over, do we want to be unified? Do we want to find love and compassion? Or our free will is, overrides everything. Or do we want to continue down the route of separation, conflict, destruction, and eventually the demise of at least our species on this planet? So um is that the type of question that that can be
Well, it
asked?
is, but I think I would love to continue to talk about
Yes,
it
let's talk about it then. Perfect.
because there's so much that you just said there that I'd like to address. And
Perfect.
one is that conflict is never going to go away.
Right.
What conflict revolution is, it's a system of self-dealing with conflict that stops the projection. It gets the emotion moving and loved. It quiets down the mind and it brings alignment to compassion so that this conflict that you're resolving or I'm resolving, we're resolving, will either, if we don't resolve it, it's either going to be war or cancer.
Hmm.
In quotes, it's going to be externally manifest or it's going to be internally manifest.
Okay.
So I would say that this is a time for humans, and especially anybody who enjoys the laws of attraction and that whole secret thing, is that you are called right now
Yeah.
to feel what is really going on the planet and not turn away.
Hmm.
And so I'm not going to discourage anybody from going after their green Ferrari because
Yep. Yep.
we're here, but we need you.
Right.
And we need you to understand yourselves and how you operate. We sometimes say humans have what we call exploding backpacks, that they have these backpacks on there, they're filled with dynamite and they don't know it. And they're throwing them around, they throw it in the corner, they throw it in their locker. So we need to do this. And
Mm-hmm.
so we're calling for the participation of the willing. People who are willing to take this thought experiment with us, who are willing to go, yeah, I want to go into my wave and see what I might not even be knowing that I'm doing. And once you begin to do that and you get it even the first time and you see this manifestation happen that you can't plan, you can't, you know, like my friend in Norway, she goes back to Barbados all the time now. She
Yeah, sure.
can't see what's going to manifest
Right.
when you do this work. But when you do it, it adds to that possibility that our collective energy, all of us doing this, where now all of our perfect projections are going to influence how that army responds or how
Mm-hmm.
that soldier responds, or I don't know, I don't claim to know
Right, right.
how that secret manifestation happens, but
Yeah.
I know it happens on a microcosmic level. So this is the whole experiment that we're on right now, this whole mission of let's
Yeah.
see how many people, and more than ever, and you're feeling it, and I know your listeners are feeling it, is that okay, yeah, there's a green Ferrari, but there's extinction on our
Yeah, no,
doorstep,
absolutely. Absolutely. That's it.
and
You
we
know,
don't
and
want to
and
miss
that's
it.
why, like I always say, like the law of attraction teachings are the gateway drug. It's the gateway drug to
Right.
spirituality because, you know, they lure you in with that Ferrari and then all of a sudden you find yourself studying metaphysics and now you're, you know, now you're like walking around being nice to the cashier at the checkout, you know, and like that's the, you know,
Exactly.
there's the microcosmo also in your own life, right? You know, we tend to be the most rotten to our family members, right? Those are the ones who get the brunt of our bad mood at the end of the day, or you know, the people we take for granted, et cetera, et cetera. And then, you know, the people that we consider invisible, the people who are like passing by us on the street that, you know, we're in a bad mood. So what's the point in us smiling? But you know what? There is, and that's what I will always argue for. There is the point of you being the one that's going to offer the smile for first, right? To step into that space for first, because you don't know how it's going to change someone's day. It might change your whole neighborhood to be, you know, from the neighborhood where nobody smiled to, oh, now this is the neighborhood where everyone smiles. And actually, hey, do you guys want to start a garden project, or do you want to do whatever? Do you want to change, you know, the legislation about this mine that's coming up, or whatever it is, and cooperation, collaboration, and shared interest. um in terms of like conflict never being resolved, I do think, however, that if and when, I'll say when, because I like to step into the timeline I want, um, people do adopt the idea that all conflict starts within and then it is then projected outwards. I think, first of all, yes, there will be differences of opinions. There should be, because that's how we create and that's how we bounce off each other. But I don't think there will be as much of this attachment to those differences of opinions and choices, and that unwillingness to collaborate, right? When I was a kid, I remember, you know, when I would hear about political things, I would say like, but why? You know, why? You know, and everyone, I think that's the thought on everyone's mind, you know, all the time when you hear about things happening in the world that we know inside ourselves are just not right. You go, but why? But why? But why? And you know, the teachers and my parents and the adults in the world would say like, you know, it's really complicated. You know, it's really complicated, the why, right? And I don't actually think it is. I think we've just been telling ourselves for a long time that it's really complicated. And I do think that it's, you know, a lot simpler. I think it's a question of each person coming to a decision that they're less afraid of, you know, survival or losing what they really like or whatever it is, than they are afraid of living in a state of hatred or darkness or without the open heart, right? So I'm moving or hoping to be moving to a place in my life where it's a far worse existence for me to live with a closed heart than it would be for me to be faced with any sort of situation that would ask of me to close it, if that makes any sense.
It
Um,
does.
yeah. So I totally like. So you're participation of the Willing Tour. Can you talk about that a little bit for me? So you mentioned it briefly that you want anyone who's willing to do this work to step into it more. Can you tell us how you're hoping to bring that to the world?
Well, I'm beginning in actually I began in Duluth on Sunday with
Mm-hmm.
my first event. And so it's
Wow.
the first time I'm doing live events since 2011. And I used to spend most of my winters since about 2007 in Europe going back and forth teaching and training and channeling and even doing music. And then in 2011, there was my mining situation. So I came in off the road and I put all that aside. So it's been, and then of course, COVID brought us all in. But it's the first time. And so I've got some events lined up for the United States coming up. I'm going to be traveling down to Georgia where I'm going to be camping out for the winter, but I'm headed over to Oslo, Norway, where I've done a great deal of work over there, and hopefully I'm going to get to the UK. I was invited to Tel Aviv. I've been invited to Romania, and just to bring this message, bring this work. And it isn't even that I need everybody to do
Sure.
these step by step instructions, but you hear it, you have your own interpretation of exactly what I'm saying. And if we can
Mm-hmm.
activate people's innate understanding of, oh, wait a minute, yes, I can master my ego. Yes, I can do this. I can bring peace to myself. And when
Mm-hmm.
I said conflict, I think conflict gets resolved all the time
Right.
when we align to compassion, but it's always it's an ongoing monitor
I
of
think
who
so
we
too.
are.
Yeah.
It's our own monitor. So, and then also on the website on synergyalliance.llc, I have a lot of regular conflict resolution and unified field theories and maps of human consciousness presentations on a regular basis on Zoom. I offer them all the time. I can't do it like regular, but at regular frequencies, and people are sure welcome to come, and
Beautiful.
they're just my gift to the world. And so, and I know there's something afoot here for me coming up that I'm being guided really divinely, because my intuition, I've never been so aligned to compassion, I don't think, in my life, where my
Beautiful.
intellect is not bucking anything. It's just settled and humbled and
Mm.
waiting to discover,
What's next?
how can I make this better? And
Absolutely.
you just, last thing that you said about, giving that smile, we might be in a bad mood, but we're going to give the smile. I always think about what Jesus said in Party of 12, one of my books. I interviewed him too, and he said he could just walk through a crowd. People could touch the hem of his garment, and his alignment to compassion was radiating out,
Yeah.
changing uh changing their perception and their vision and their feelings in their heart. And that's what I think we're all trying to become. So we're not waiting for somebody to smile at us. We're going to be those change
Yeah.
agents. And that's the good news, is that there's this part of our ego that goes, oh no, I'm not responsible for that. Yes, you are. That's good news, because if you're creating it, you can uncreate it, and then you can recreate it
That's right.
however
However
you
you want.
want.
Exactly.
So it's
Totally
exciting. It's
agree.
an
Yeah.
exciting time, as scary as it is
I
too.
think it is super exciting. And like I said, I think that, when Vagrein said, you don't need the occasion to rise to the occasion, right? In
I love
a
that.
sort of critique of the way we go about doing things, from a higher perspective, like we really don't need all the conflict if we would just get this message, the message you're sharing. However, because we do have free will and we are choosing to have the experience to be either the witness or the participant in conflicts, then great, because then you do have the opportunity to rise to the occasion, because the occasion is right in your face. It's really at times life or death, and people do get to, in each moment, choose who they want to choose to be. So if people listening to this are sort of the mind that they want to call in that new earth that everyone's talking about, that they want to have peace and they want to have kindness and they want to have compassion, they want to be able to express themselves and the love that they feel within themselves, well, then that's great news, because we get to have the opportunity in very challenging experiences at times to do so. And if you can do it in the hard times, then it becomes super easy in the easy times, and then we're masters. So we're having the advanced course on how to live from a state of love. And I think that's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, me too. I'm so honored and humbled to be a part of the movement, to be able to have these conversations
Yeah.
and help people to also understand and become those sovereign beings. And that's why I love all the messages. I mean, you clearly, it's all a party.
Hmm.
Your party, my party, we're all on the same page here.
Yeah.
And it's super exciting, super exciting.
So beautiful. So can you tell us again where people can find you and what's coming up next for you? I know you mentioned you have your offerings on the website. Can you mention the website again?
Yes, you can go to synergyalliance.llc. That's the whole master website, but you can also go to Barbara with BARBARAWITH.com, and that's where my readings, and you can register for the events. I've got November 1st here in Minneapolis, a night of the Day of the Dead, a night of the Day of the Dead channel with Einstein and the party. And then November 10th and 11th, I'm in Austin, Texas with a group down there that has invited me. Events will be on synergyalliance.llc, and come and see me, or come and join us in a Zoom and really dig into this work. And it's very igniting. It's so rudimental that one dose of it can be very, very ignite everything that you already know.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for joining us on Some Kind of Mystic. I do ask my guests, what does the word mystic mean to you?
Mystery. It reminds me of Edward Witten, who invented M theory. And when they asked him what M meant, he said it can be magic, mystery, manifestation, miracle. It all depends on how you want to use it. So mystic feels like that word. It's just that place of mystery
So
where anything's
beautiful.
possible. Anything can happen at any time. That's my mantra.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Barbara. It's been a pleasure to have you, and I'm so honored.
Well, thank you, Jesse, and all the best too with your work too. Fabulous.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Some Kind of Mystic podcast. If you're hearing this message, you've listened all the way to the end of this episode, and for that, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's people just like you that keep me motivated to bring you more and more enlightened content to the world. Barbara has generously offered a 20% discount coupon to the listeners of the Some Kind of Mystic podcast. The coupon code is Jessie20, JESSIE20, and you can use that right on her site. I'd like to invite you to consider joining my mailing list, even if you're already following me on YouTube or Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, anywhere else that we're publishing content. This is because once you're on my mailing list, I'm sure that I don't have to depend on an external service in order to keep in touch with you. I have to admit that I don't send out a newsletter that frequently, but when I do, it's to let you know about special events or coupons, new podcast episodes, courses and workshops I'm creating, opportunities to meet in person, like at the summer retreat that I'm currently organizing here in Italy, or even just to share some new Vagrein coaching or healing content. I do send out 2 free chapters of my book, Vagrein Seeking Ends When Sharing Begins, whenever someone signs up for the newsletter, so maybe that's some more incentive for you. And I'd love to see you on my list so that we can keep in touch no matter what.
Well, I was arrested
Ooh.
in July of 2021.
Oh no.
I was living in a water protector camp in northern Minnesota as the pipeline was coming through the wetlands and the Indian reservations. And we did 6 of us chained ourselves together and sat on the easement for several hours until they took us to jail for 3 days.
Oh no.
So that was just a truly, everyone should get arrested. Everyone should go to jail for justice once in their life, because it really was life-changing.
Wow.
I came out of there like, I don't give one, I have no more F's to give about all that rack in my head. Oh, you can't do this. It's like, no, I've been to jail. I can do anything.
I'm in the jail. I could do anything. Amazing.
Dismissed too. It was
Great.
dismissed.
Well, that's good. That's
So
very good.
yeah,
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And
you
yeah,
bet.
have a wonderful time with all your work. It's really a blessing.